Welcome to When Not Yet Becomes Right Now, the podcast where we dive deep into the moments of transformation, the times when not yet shifts into right now, and everything changes. I'm your host, Jen Ginty, and this podcast is all about those pivotal moments in our life journeys. You know the ones, when the hesitation fades, when we take that first step, even if it feels like a leap. It's in these moments that growth and healing begins. Each episode will explore stories of resilience, moments of clarity, and the sparks that ignite real change. From personal experiences to expert insights, we'll uncover how people navigate the complex journey we call life and come out stronger on the other side. Whether you're searching for that spark in your own life or just curious about how change unfolds for others, you're in the right place. We'll discuss the ups and downs, the breakthroughs and setbacks, and how to embrace the right now, even when it feels out of reach. Because sometimes the hardest part of the journey is realizing that the moment you've been waiting for has already arrived. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome to When Not Yet Becomes Right Now. Today I have a very special guest on. His name is David, and let me introduce him. David Douglas is an author, counselor, and mindfulness practitioner dedicated to promoting mental well-being through gratitude, optimism, and self-care. After overcoming personal struggles with substance use, David has spent years integrating mindfulness and meditation practices into his life, drawing on various spiritual traditions, including Buddhism and Celtic spirituality. His journey of resilience and transformation led him to become a counselor, where he now helps others navigate their own paths to healing. Through his book, A Guide to Cultivating Optimism, Harnessing Gratitude, Optimism, and Compassion for a Fulfilling Life, David shares his insights on how gratitude and optimism can transform one's mindset and life, offering readers the tools they need to create lasting change. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So glad you could come on the show. So let's get into it. Tell us your origin story.
All right. Well, that starts out a long time ago because I'm getting older, but I'll try to keep it exciting. So I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in a pretty big family. Actually, my mom had children, and she was divorced, and my dad had children too, and his wife had actually passed away, unfortunately, from epileptic seizure, and he was left with 5 kids. And my mom, she had 2 boys, and then my grandmother actually introduced them, and then once they got together, kind of like the Brady Bunch, they decided to have more children, and they had me and my twin sister. What a surprise!
Wow.
And then, it was crazy. And then my mom actually had my younger sister Ruth when she was 42 years old.
Wow,
And
yeah.
so growing up in the Midwest, I grew up in that my family, as far as I can remember, they were pretty devout Christians. They were a big part of the church. And at first they had sent us kids to like a Baptist church, which was in the Midwest. It was pretty much scare you into heaven. And then the next thing I know, my parents ended up getting involved in a church that was that was in our same town, and they became a big part of that. And so I was taught the ways of the sinner and how to try not to abstain from that. Looking back, it was kind of like, to me, it was more based upon fear than anything. And I never ever really felt attracted to it. And I don't really know why. It was like I would see people who were like really super devout, and they would do all the motions and stuff during church and everything like that. And I don't know. I just always had this like, what is this, But one thing that it did instill on me was, and not to be totally negative about Christianity, because I'm not, but one thing that it did instill upon me was guilt. because how they taught and everything, it was like, I was young, and it's like these certain I would say instincts or whatever that I had of kind of questioning things and looking into things and stuff, and some of those things were taboo to them, and I never really quite understood that. And but one thing uh, that kind of correlated with that was in the area that I grew up with older brothers and cousins and stuff that I was close to. It was very much kind of a party central. I mean, people like to party, and so I grew up in this time period, which was like in the mid to late 80s, to where I was kind of becoming into my teenage years, where if anybody that lived through that knows that, there people looked at you partying different. It was always fun. And I see that has changed a lot, which is a good thing. But at the time growing up, it was pretty normal to go out drinking and everything. And so we did, and I had uh, my older brother James, who I ran around. We shared a room and everything, and we had this neighbor that lived. Well, he was kind of a neighbor. He lived kind of probably a block away. You could see his house from our house, and he was kind of not a very good influence. And I'm sure that we probably weren't either. But we used to drink a lot, and it's like at the time, I didn't really see it, but I remember the first time that I actually really drank, and I remember being able to drink a lot. And I was just like, "Oh, this is kind of weird." And and with the knowledge that I have now, I can look back and I can say, "Oh, well, that's definitely signs of that you are uh, probably what's the proper word, dispositioned or whatever, predisposition to probably become an alcoholic, because it ran in the family. Especially it was pretty rampant on my father's side, but I didn't see it as a kid. I was young and just having fun. So I would party and stuff, and but there was always kind of like a knowing, which I go back to, like almost like a guilt thing that was kind of established. I mean, obviously, it's not good to drink underage and drink excessively, but there was that guilt thing that kind of played a big role with. And my mom, I think she pretty much knew what was going on, but she used to say something about this time in my life when she knew that we were drinking and stuff. And she used to tell me what runs in the family. And it went like right over my head. I mean, I knew what she was talking about, but it's kind of like the thing when you're young, you don't understand your mortality, and you think you're going to live forever, and you think all the bad stuff happens to other people. You don't think that that stuff ever can affect you. So anyway, as in school, I tried to. I was in school. I tried to be a good student, but I was pretty bored, and I didn't really try that hard, and I got by, but I still continued to party through my high school days, and that's when I had a really good friend of mine. I always played in bands and stuff. I've been a musician since I was young, and so I started running around with a lot of the kids, that like-minded kids that were were into playing music and so on and so forth, and which um, the lifestyle that the music that we played, which was like rock and stuff like that, and we idolized these musicians and stuff. And of course, these musicians, it was a typical kind of set. Uh, they lived their life. They had a certain way that they lived their life, and it was usually surrounded by partying. So that too was another, I guess, red flag as well, because I'm looking up to these people who are drinking, and I'm predispositioned from my father's side to probably become an alcoholic. And but I didn't see it. I was having fun, and looking back, it was like I probably could have toned it down to a certain bit. But one thing that I did have with me though, that I do looking back as an adult, is I've always had like this empathy and this compassion that I carried for, and I'm not sure where that came from. And so I was always like really, really mellow, even though I was like a kid that liked to party and stuff like that. I always tried to stop and think about other people and stuff like that. So even though I was doing that stuff, I still had this conscience that would speak to me and say, how is this going to affect other people or whatever like that? And including yourself. But I think that that was a saving grace. And whether that goes back to the teachings of the church or whatever, I don't know. I'm sure that it did. I don't think it's all bad, but even though it felt like that at the time. So, um, so I get, I finished school, and in my senior year, I guess one of the things that kind of slowed my progress down or kind of made me start kind of having a negative attitude in certain aspects was I tried to go to college in Chicago um, to study classical guitar. And I worked really, really hard at that. I was always very disciplined with my practice because I was like really, really super focused and just super driven. That's what I wanted to do. I was one of those kids that actually found out young exactly. I mean, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I've worked hard at it, and I got an opportunity to audition for the Chicago Conservatory of Music, and I learned two pieces, guitar pieces, and one was from uh, I can't remember the name of it. It was a Latin song. It was from like the 1600s, and it was actually written on lute. And then I learned Boxbury in E minor, and I played that, and they and I passed the audition, and they said that I was definitely able to I could go to school there. I was good enough, and I was like ecstatic. And so I told my parents, and they were like, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to make a living doing that?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I don't know, but I think I can figure something out. And so they didn't really encourage me to continue on with that. And when we didn't have a lot of money growing up, actually we had very little. My mom never worked, but my dad, he worked a factory job. So it came back with the mediocre grades that I had and everything. It wasn't like was a good enough student to get all these scholarships and everything. So that I just had to give up on that. And looking back, that was pretty devastating because I'd set my hopes up. I'd worked really hard for that. And so I kind of took on this attitude of like, it just didn't, it felt like things weren't working out like I expected them to. And maybe I just had too high of expectations. I mean, that's a, that's probably has a lot to do with it. But anyway, so I ended up getting a factory job, and I tried to make the most of it, but I definitely had kind of a chip on my shoulder in a lot of ways. And so the first one of the things that I wanted to do is I didn't want to live with my parents because we were kind of getting to where we weren't getting along. So I got out and got a factory job and worked really hard at it and got my own place and stuff. But at the time when all this was going on, I was a daily drinker. I mean, that was just a normal thing. I mean, I would work and I would come home and I would drink about 3 or 4 beers, and then I would take a little tiny nap, and then I would get up and make some food and drink until I went to bed. And I didn't think anything of it. And then the weekends would come, and I had a lot of friends, and it's kind of funny how they all like to drink too.
Mhm.
but
Birds
but
of a feather, right?
yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, we had a lot of fun, but everything was centered around drinking. It's like, I remember when we would go camping, I always used to think, man, camping is like super, super expensive. It's like, well, no, it's not, because what's expensive is all the booze that you buy to take with you. You know, if you get your tent and all that, your camping gear established, you have it, and you just need some food, so it's just the cost of food. And if you didn't drink the alcohol, it probably wouldn't cost you $200 or $300 to go camping for 3 or 4 days. Hindsight is sometimes 2020. But so I worked at a factory job, and I think that and with the drinking and everything, I just got to where I didn't feel um I felt like I wanted there was something missing in my life. And I didn't know what it was. And it was like, I mean, I felt, I don't know, I just felt kind of empty inside. And I knew it wasn't something that, I didn't feel like it was something that going to church is going to fulfill, because I already tried that. And uh another thing happened too when I was 17 that I should mention too, that played along with this role is I I was with two of my cousins, and one of them ended up getting shot in the back.
Wow.
And the bullet missed me by like an inch and a half. And it was it was a crazy time. And I think that I went through like this in the process of that. I went through uh, almost like a nervous breakdown. I was 16 years old.
Mm.
And so I had that, and that really changed a lot of stuff. Um, and and that probably contributed to drinking, because at the time it was like mental health was not as, it was kind of looked down upon as kind of like, if you if you go to a therapist, you're kind of weird, you know.
Yeah, you're crazy if you go to a therapist, right? It's just an automatic of, my God, you're obviously crazy if you need to talk to someone about it. Yeah, there's a real stigma. I think there still is, but back then there was no way you could talk about going to a therapist.
Yeah,
You were shunned.
yeah, totally. And at the time too, is with the mental health, I could see that my mom's mental health was deteriorating, and she like started like hoarding and doing all kinds of like different stuff. She was very abrasive when she would talk to us, and how she talked to us and stuff like that. So that was one of the reasons why I was like, man, I want to get out of this. I want to get away from this. And so anyway, fast forward, I was working in the Midwest, and I had a factory job, but I just felt like a disconnect, and I didn't know what it was. And I had a kind of like a really biased attitude, and kind of like, I just I think back about, sometimes I get reminded of how I reacted to certain things. Even, I mean, I was never a violent person or anything like that. But I could be a real jerk, and had my own biases and stuff. And I just look back and I kind of think, man, I'm glad that I changed from that. But my grandmother was living in Oregon, and I don't even know what caused me to do this, but I talked to my mom and I said, "Hey, the next time you talk to grandma on the phone, can you ask her if I can come out and visit?" And she was like, she came back, and a week later or whatever, and says, "Yeah, grandma was like, why would you think that you couldn't?" And I was like, "Okay, cool. So I'm gonna come out." And so I actually went out to Oregon, and it was like, it was along the coast, and I was like, oh my God, this is like super cool out here. And I can do some of the things that I've always wanted to do. And like they have an ocean, I can start surfing and so on and so forth. And I did. But the thing is my grandmother, she had this one rule that she told me if I ended up staying there was that her brother, my great uncle, who was a great guy, he was a minister of a church, and him and his wife. And she says, if you want to stay with me, you have to go to church. And I'm just like, damn it, you know?
Hmm.
And which, I mean, looking back to me, it's like, I guess that's the problem the issue that I do have with a lot of people in Christianity is its exclusiveness and how they're kind of like, well, if you want me to help you, this is what you have to do. And I never really agreed with that.
I
And
think
so
that's I think that's very generational, to be honest, because my mother was also very much like that. The religion thing, we could go on for hours about religion and guilt. I think that's a really important topic because people don't really think much about like how religion affects you and the things that are taught to us that are supposedly the right thing, right? Quote, right thing to live your life as. And when you don't feel as though that is the right way for you to live, there's that guilt of, well, I must be doing something wrong, or I'm going against this idea of how I'm supposed to be according to this religious group.
yeah, I agree. And that question was presented to me. I was playing at a music festival one time, and I was talking to this guy. It was like this total hippie festival. It was cool, and 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 I was talking about a situation where I was actually feeling guilt, and the guy stopped me, and he says, "You ever think that that might be just originated from your Christian upbringing?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've never really stopped to think about it, but yeah."
Yeah,
But
religion just I I have found my way to spirituality and having my own ideas of what I believe is my core beliefs and values based on, the spirituality that I have. But I remember I grew up Catholic and I grew up in a family where my father was our abuser. And the idea of going to church every Sunday with my abuser and being told I have to do whatever he wants me to do was just a real kick in the teeth. And from then on, when I was like a teenager, there was no way I was going to follow a Catholic, you know, lifestyle. Little one learning to navigate their big emotions? Meet My Moody Monster, the pull apart buddy to help kids understand and manage their feelings. With its fun, interactive design, Moody turns tough feelings into teachable moments, giving your child a playful way to express themselves. Whether it's after a rough day or when those big frustrations hit, Moody is there to lend a hand. Perfect for calming down or even just a cuddle. My Moody Monster helps your child communicate their emotions while learning healthy coping skills. Go to mymoodymonster.com to learn about Moody today.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and yeah, it's devastating when you see that, and then you're like, well, I have to follow along. It's almost like you feel like you're locked in a cage because you can't, you have to kind of surrender to their to what they want. And that was always a difficult thing. It's kind of like with my mom and dad. It was like we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday nights. And the messages were mostly about how sinful and how screwed up you were, and that basically that you could never change. And it's like I never, I guess the question, I was like, so if I'm so screwed up and everything, then I I I don't think that I am that screwed up, but they evidently think that I'm screwed up. and I was supposed to be in God's image, then why am I so what's the deal, you know? It's
Yeah.
um
I mean, I think it comes down to control because religions and even going as far as cults, that's the main ideal behind a cult or a religion is to follow along and to live in a controlled environment that one or maybe a group of people control and tell you what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be feeling, and how you're supposed to be living your life.
yeah, and I guess like I'm like really, really super skeptic of because of that exact reason and knowing that once you understand that when you even get into like uh look into like even in it was with different religions, like I really am attracted to a lot of Celtic paganism, you
Hmm.
know. I don't know what it is. I mean, it was like, and I was always taught growing up that, hey, that's wrong. That is like totally wrong. It's like, then why does it feel so right? You know?
Exactly.
But but even with that though, is like the people that I met that were involved in that, and I was trying to expand my knowledge on that and walk that kind of that path. I would meet people who were like, no, I'm not this person is like he's using this in a way to control. And I've always been like a real probably super independent person where I'm like question stuff and I'm like, but my the reason I guess the reason why I say that is because even though those are just the people that I mean, the whole concept of why I was interested in it in the first place is still there. But whenever you get humans involved, it seems like some people have different motives and some people have motives of control. And I don't understand that. And I don't want to understand that because that's not how I am. It's like, if you, like the saying goes, if you love someone or love something, set it free
Hmm.
and let it be what it is and don't try to control it. And so, but I also have been really attracted to Buddhism for a lot of the Buddhist principles for a long, long time. And I guess going back to like the origins of the how I found gratitude and stuff is because I had such a negative attitude and I still struggle with that. And just because I wrote a book on it doesn't mean that I don't struggle with that. If there's anybody that needs to write a book about that more than is me, because I did have a negative attitude and I still utilize those core principle foundations to this day. And I'm always referring to it. And it's like um, I want to throw stuff out there into the world, into this world that is positive. And because I think if any time, right now we really, really need that in the world with
Yeah.
such disconnect and everything that's going on.
Oh, absolutely. And, when you live a life where someone is always pointing out the negatives to you, either about you or about things around you, your atmosphere, it's really hard to pull yourself out of feeling those same negative thoughts because they're getting ingrained in you, whether it was your mother or, just people around you giving out that negative idea whenever you do something there's something negative about it, like when you wanted to go to college and you had the skills to go to college and do what you really wanted to do, and then having someone turn around and say, well, you can't do anything with that. And I know that feeling because my mother, she was trying really hard to make sure that I excelled in life. So I wanted to go to college for writing. And she said, well, you'll never be able to do anything with a creative writing degree. You have to pick something else, or I won't help you. I won't help you get loans. I won't help you with that kind of stuff. That can just change your whole idea of the way that you live and what you have instead of what you don't have rather than what you have. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It's kind of like you looking back, it's like you want to go back. If you could go back and relive that experience, knowing what I know now, you'd want to say, "What do you have, a freaking crystal ball or something? You can see the future." And I think that goes along with like people who get disconnected with optimism
Mm.
because of that stuff, and so pulling yourselves out of those trenches and stuff. The things that helped me do that were little subtle, tiny, simple things that for some reason, I don't know, I was able um to 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 get a little bit of it and bring it into my life and kind of um try to make it expand. And like for instance, like and it's in my book about gratitude, but I had this I grew up around these people who were just like really really like they didn't it was like they would just say like stuff to tear you down. Like my aunt, like she would come over to visit and she was just nasty. I mean, here's an example. She comes over one time, I'm just a kid, and I have this like hat on. It's almost like a cowboy hat. Anyway, it was a little unique. And before she even gets into the house, she was like, she said, "Where'd you get that hat? It looks really stupid." And I'm just like, I was just a kid. I mean, but those are things that you don't say to a kid,
No, no, not at all. I mean, I
unless
have similar experiences of that. It.
unless you. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Unless you, I was just going to say, unless you want to spread your negativity, and that's what they want to do,
Oh, yeah. Because if they're miserable, they want everybody else to be miserable too.
Yeah.
If you lived your life in a negative way, that's all you're going to put out as well.
Hmm.
And that's corrosive.
For sure, for sure. But so one of the things that happened is it's in the book is where I started actually finding gratitude has to me has many paths. So growing up around these people who were always negative, they never had anything good to say about you. They was always kind of cutting you down. When I had moved to Oregon and I was working at an appliance repair place, and I ended up going to these elderly couple, and but anyway, she was so genuine, and she just complimented me over and over, and it was a weird experience. It was like the thing is like people can compliment you and everything, and you can be like, okay, well, they're being a little superficial or whatever, or they're just being nice. I really genuinely felt like this lady she was genuine and everything, and it had a profound impact on me. And right then I was like, that's how I want to treat people from this day forth. I don't want to be this person who's constantly tearing people down, pointing out their flaws and stuff like that. If I do point out their flaws, it's going to be in a loving, non-judgmental, kind way. And I try to do my best to hold myself accountable to that.
Yeah.
And but that was a pure, profound moment that is obviously been had a lasting impression on me because I was like 24 at the time.
And how was it with going to your grandmother's? Did you see that you were drinking less? Did you feel like you still needed to drink in order to feel up to par, so to say?
Well, she wouldn't let me drink in the house, and but I was feeling better. I was feeling really, really good. I started surfing. I started surfing every day, and I was always been pretty athletic and stuff, and a really good swimmer. So I always thought surfing would be cool. So that's what I did. So I was pretty kept myself pretty busy with surfing and working and stuff. And but a friend of mine that I grew up with, he was working up in Alaska as a biologist, and he would come down to go to Mexico. he was pretty free spirited, and he would come, and I ended up he ended up staying at my grandmother's um, house with me until I moved out. But there was a funny thing. My grandmother was really naive, and I'll tell you this story because it's really funny because my friend Larry, he loved to smoke marijuana, and my great uncle, he was the minister. He had a son who was like did not live the Christian life at all, and he liked to smoke like massive amounts of marijuana. And I
Rebel.
remember, I remember one day I came home from work, and it was when my friend and my cousin first met. And I remember my grandmother saying, "Wow, Larry and Robin sure are getting along really well." And I was just like, "Huh, I wonder why." And sure enough, so it was just like this naive. She thought that they just hit it off really well. It's like, well, they had something in common, and it was you smoked it, and they smoked a lot of it. At that time, I was always like a real high functioning alcoholic. And once I moved out on my own and I was started hanging around with friends, we started kind of fell into the environment of drinking a lot. But it was always on fun and just having a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I did looking back, I was like, yeah, I definitely feel better not being hungover. But I was young, and so my body handled it really well. But and then you know, as far as the drinking goes, I definitely continued to do it. I got back on that path, and I would drink heavy for a while, and then I would stop. But when I would drink, it was always like a daily thing, whether it be 4 beers. I just thought that that was normal. I really honestly did. I was just like, that's how my all my friends do it. They they go to work, and when they get done with work,
Crack a
they
beer.
yeah, crack a beer, and you crack a bunch. But so I ended up continuing to drink, and then I wouldn't drink, and then I ended up in this relationship, pretty long relationship. It lasted 14 years, and we never got married. We were living in sin. Um, but But in the meantime, I had learned how to frame houses, and so I always wanted to live. I like living up in the woods, and I kind of I got a job as a maintenance guy at this creamery, and that was like it was a small town, coastal town, and that was like one of the best jobs that you could had. So I pretty much just kind of settled in to say, this is my life. This is what my life is supposed to be. I'm going to go and work at this factory as a maintenance guy, which was a cool job. I mean, I learned a lot, and I kind of gave up on the music other than just playing for myself. And I ended up buying a piece of property because I liked being up in the woods. I always felt really comfortable in the forest. And I built a house. It was a 2-story home that I built. It was small. It's only like 500 square feet, and it was like totally off the grid because the power company wanted a bunch of money for me to put the electricity in, and I didn't really want to pay for that. So I went totally off the grid, had solar panels and stuff, and had a well drilled. I witched a well. I have that talent. I've witched
Wow.
actually. Yeah, I'm like 4-0.
Nice.
I built this house, and it was cool. I lived up in the woods, but I was still drinking a lot. And but something happened that actually was a life changing experience. I woke up one morning and my bottom lip was like totally swelled up, like where it was ready to burst. And I thought I got bit by a spider.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird. And I was living up 17 miles away from town, up in the mountains. And I was thought that was weird, and I went back to sleep, and I woke up, and I was like um, called a friend of mine, and I was talking to him, and I was like, I don't know, like 4 o'clock this morning, my tongue or my lip swelled up, and now it's kind of gone, but it's still kind of swelled. He was like, "Oh, it's probably something you ate or something, you know." And I realized while I was talking to him that I was having a hard time articulating my words, and the reason why is because my tongue was starting to swell up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I went into the hospital, and literally just the right side of my tongue swelled up. It was
Wow.
just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
So yeah, it is weird, but I've always been kind of weird, special, unique.
That's right.
Um, but what I ended up finding out after having that um, was I got diagnosed with hereditary angioedema,
Mm.
and that was something that my mother and my grandmother had. So it continued to happen, and it would be like really scary. Like I've had my tongue swell up so much that I couldn't keep it in my mouth. And I was in a hospital, and there's nothing that they can do for you other than give you like um, this special shot, which has basically got blood plasma in it, which has C proteins or whatever. Um, but it was devastating because it was like I was really, really happy in my life there. Things were working out. I was making good money. I was really healthy. I felt really good. I had the house that I had built with my hands. Things were going good. And then it was like, bam. And what was scary about it was like, I would be fine during the day. And when I would go to sleep, I would wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when my tongue would be swelled up or my lips. I didn't know what was causing this. And it was like literally having a monster sleeping underneath my bed because I didn't know when, if it was going to happen the next morning, because it was like it would literally like be living in this nightmare when I was in the hospital. And I come to find out that now my wife today she's super, super smart. She's a food scientist, and she has a degree in chemical engineering. And, oh yeah, I'd split up with the other one, just so you know. And, but I was devastated. I was drinking a lot because I felt like my life was over. It's like, how am I going to deal with this? So she did some digging and stuff, and come to find out that milk proteins were triggering it. There's other things that are contributing factors. But I was working at a creamery. I
Oh,
was a
yeah.
maintenance guy.
That's right. Oh, man.
And so that was the end of that job. So here's how much I to give you an idea how bad it got with um, my drinking is I entered myself into a treatment facility because I was literally was not eating. I was just drinking constantly, and I was like, I'm gonna die. And I would go through withdrawals, and my hands would shake really, really bad and stuff. And I went to a treatment facility outside of Salem, Oregon. It was a great place, and I must have liked it really well because I ended up going 2 more times
Mm.
to that same facility. I would relapse. I would go like a year, and I'd be like really good, and then I would have the hereditary angioedema attack or something, or this what we call in the substance use disorder world is euphoric recall. I
Okay.
struggled with that, always remembering the good about drinking and not the bad.
Mm.
And I would relapse. I would go like a year or whatever, and then I'd be like, no, I'm fine. I'm normal. I can drink normal. It's like, and I would for a little while. And then it was like, oh, no, guess I'm not, you know?
Mm.
And so it was kind of humbling. But there was a time where I still ended up going again a couple different times before I'm like, okay, I can't do this, you know?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what inspired me to become a substance use disorder counselor. But I went one time. I which you do not do. I withdrew on alcohol without any
Mm.
medical assistance and
Yeah, that's
stuff
dangerous.
up the cabin,
Yeah.
which I
Oof.
called the cabin, and I was hallucinating. I remember I was walking down this path that I knew really well, and I knew that there was nobody else on here, and I would actually see people. I saw a guy sitting along the side of the road. I can still describe him to this day. And I was thinking, what in the world? Why is there a dude up here, man? This is like crazy. And I started getting kind of defensive and I walked on the other side of the path and he like disappeared. It was crazy.
That
And
that's wild.
yeah.
So you've gone through a couple of times where you relapsed. What was that time? What was that moment that was, this is it. It's done. I'm finished with alcohol.
When I realized how much my alcoholism was affecting other people,
Mm.
it kind of like um, I realized how kind of for lack of better words, how big of a dirtbag that I kind of became. I was becoming somebody that was totally going against every grain of my personality, of how I looked at life and how I treated other people. And the negative impact and how much people were concerned about me. They were like, what, yeah, this is like a totally different, this is not you, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's understandable. So how did you get yourself into counseling others, especially the book? Tell us about the book.
Um, well, I just met a lot of really cool people who were my counselors, and they told me, the counselors told me, they said, man, you should really consider getting into this field because you would be really good at it. And I'm like, really? And they were like, yeah, your personality. And one counselor said, I'm wanting to start a treatment facility in Hawaii, and I would hire you in a heartbeat if you had your credentials. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I was just kind of like, okay, and I'll give it a try. And so I told my wife, she was probably at her wit's end with me. And I was like, hey, dear, guess what I'm going to do? And she was like, okay, I'll see it when I believe it. She was
Right.
very supportive, but I was kind of probably pretty annoying, pretty hard husband to keep. Um,
Mm,
but I mean, I wasn't like abusive or anything like that. I've never been like that. But I mean, I was, just drinking. I was just being kind of doing my own thing. Um, when I got out of the treatment facility, I said, okay, this is what I'm doing. And I had some money saved up from working, and I was doing contracting work and remodel work and stuff before all this kind of stuff happened. I got out of treatment, um, started looking at treatment facilities and calling them and saying, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" And there was a place called Sundowning Ranch that they were like, "Yeah, we're looking for house managers." I didn't know what that was, and I mean, then I was realized, okay, I know what they do. And so I hired on there, and I just said, I told my wife, I said, I'm enrolling in school. I'm gonna to do this. There's a college in town, and that's what I did. And I was working full time, a lot of hours at the treatment facility, helping, assisting people who were coming into the treatment facility, and while going to school to get my credentials and get my education. And while I was going to school, I realized that I've always been like a really avid reader. I love to read, and I've read so many self-help books over the years that I just always attracted to them, and like the Buddhist philosophy type books. I just always liked that, and so when I was in school, um, I would have to write a lot of papers and stuff like that, and it just came like really natural for me. It was like this meditative thing. I'd realize when I would write a paper that the only thing that was on my mind was what was I was writing, and it just I was really quick at it. And I don't want to sound pretentious. My teachers were like, "You're really good. I really like your paper," and I would get really high scores on it, and they were like, "You did a really good job of writing this. You articulate your words really well." So it was kind of a natural thing, and the compassion and this empathy thing would it would show up. I was working one on one with these patients. Some of these patients were good, and some of them were horrible. But you gotta love all of them. But I felt like I was giving back what I was given. For instance, like people who are withdrawing from alcohol and their hands are shaking so bad that you have to hold the glass for them. Well, I've had people do that for me, and when I was writing, it kind of wrote itself. When I would get all my homework done, I started writing. I wasn't at first thinking, oh, okay, I'm just going to write this book. But I knew that I felt like I wanted to write something that I could offer to the world, and maybe some people would see it and they would be like, oh wow, this is like super cool. When I did decide that I wanted to actually write the book, I wanted to point out the fact that some of the most profound, greatest things that happen to us are the small, tiny little things that sometimes we take for granted. And if there's anything that I can convey with the book, is that teach yourself how to look for the small things, because it's about the tiny things that are life-changing experiences. It's like being in the right place at the right time. Put yourself in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And you can do that by teaching yourself how to be more aware, living in the present moment. And it was kind of a combination of all these things that I offered to these people, because I'm like, this is what has worked for me. I've always struggled with depression. I've struggled with anxiety, and this is what helped me, and maybe it can help you. And so that is the premise behind the book. And growing up, though, another thing too, I guess I should point out, is that I come from a family of storytellers, and I'm that annoying guy that's like, when I'm describing something, I'm describing, oh, it was great. The wind was about 15 degrees out of the northwest. I could feel a little bit of the sun. They're
Mhm.
like, get to the
Mhm.
point, David, and I'm like, so that's kind of a double-edged sword. It can really help you out being that annoying guy who over explains.
Well, so you've given a lot of sage advice, especially this be present, be in the moment. So, how can the listeners find you?
You can go to my website, which is a guide to cultivating optimism. I have a YouTube channel too that is called Wondercraft Mindful Builds and Adventures. A long, long time ago, when I was going through like this really, really deep depression, I found a book, a Buddhist book. It was the Art of Happiness with the Dalai Lama. And if there's anything that I learned from that book, it was given to me at the right time, because I've reread it since then, and it's like, oh, this is like super basic. But at the time, it was like profound. And the whole main point for me of that book was to keep your hands moving when you're going through this stuff. And what I mean by that is to do stuff, do positive stuff. If you're down in the trenches and you feel like you can't climb your way out, you just start moving your arms and your feet. So one thing that has always been prevalent in my life has been a therapeutic uh, tool that I've used to um, get myself out of stuff, is by making stuff. And I make traditional longbows. I built a little micro camper on the channel. I'll show you how to do that. I built lots of bows. I built a Native American flute,
Wow.
just all kinds of stuff.
Mindful
If you
creation.
Yeah, but I started out with, I had, the name of it was Cultivating Optimism, and it was mostly about like how to live in the present moment. And I wanted to reflect in the book, but it seemed like it was taken off very well. And so I thought, well, how else can I, do this and convey my message? And so I switched it over and I started just building stuff. I think I've made like 40 videos so far.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's fun. I enjoy it. It was like a learning curve. So you can find me there. The book is on Amazon. And then
Great.
I have a website, a guide to cultivating optimism .com, I believe. And yeah, so
That's great. And I'll put that all in the show notes.
no, appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you so much, David, for coming on the show. It was such a great conversation.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast. This show is produced by Phoenix Freed LLC, and I'm your producer, Jen Ginty. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you have a story of your own about when a not yet moment became a right now, we encourage you to reach out and share it. You can find more information about being a guest on our show at whennotYetBecomesRightNow.com. Remember, you are not alone on your journey. Whether it's a journey of healing, growth, or transformation, every story matters. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time with another inspiring episode.